Hello and welcome to another session of tutorials. This time we're going to be looking at how to detect keyboard presses from the user. So we are in CodeSculptor. That's what we're going to use for this one. Again, simple GUI, the CodeSculptor library of functions, has some built-in keyboard handlers for us to be able to use so that we can detect keyboard. Now, what do I mean by keyboard detection, first of all? As you all probably know, you could always say something like, answer equals input, please enter an answer. And when we run that, we get a pop in CodeSculptor. We get a pop-up box if we're using idle or some other uh, line text developer tool. It might just be a line on the screen. And then we put in something and we say okay. But that requires, and that's what happens next, but that requires the user to click a button, or in idle it would require the user to press enter at the end of it. And that just doesn't really work for us on many things. What we really want to do is be able to get to the point where people are able to type a key on a keyboard and we know immediately that they've typed that key. So we're not waiting for the enter sign, the enter key, to get pressed in order to do it. This is really important in games, of course, because you're not going to press forward, enter, forward, enter, forward, enter. You're going to want to hold down your WASD keys and move around on the screen, or your arrow keys, or fire a weapon when you press the space bar, and things like that. So keyboard detection becomes important to us, and it's a whole nother way of doing input, really. We don't have to worry about this way anymore. So how do we do it? Well, what's happening inside the computer, the processor is waiting for the keyboard to interrupt it. Like the processor's kind of doing things, and then when it sees a signal from the keyboard, like I'm about to press the enter key to go to a new line, it kind of interrupts the processor's functions and says, here comes something from the keyboard. Oh, it was an enter key. Here's what to do with it. And so this is happening all the time on our computer. It's listening for the keyboard. We just have to implement that into our Python programming so that we can use the keyboard while using Python. So what we're going to do is we are going to, oh, well, let's see. Hopefully I can remember now. Um, you have to set the keyboard handler. So we're going to say something like set key down handler. And what this means is when the keys are being pressed down, there's kind of two states of keys. Well, there's three states of keys. One is they're not being touched at all. The second is that they're being pressed down. And the third is that they're being lifted up. And so sometimes we want to do things when the keys are lifted up, when you let go of the key, and sometimes we want to do things as soon as they press the key and they're continuing to hold it down, for instance. So we're going to work on key down first. This is just saying like there's a built-in handler that does this, that handles it, but we have to say this is how we want it to operate in our code, which could be different every time we create one. So usually we name our function key down because that makes sense. Like we're listening for the key down, and so our function is called key down. This could be any function name, but I typically just call it key down. Then up here in our functions, I say, okay, I said that there's a function called key down, so here it is, key down. Key down as a handler always has something coming into it, which is the key that was pressed. Like the processor knows what key is pressed and it's saying, hey, I'm listening for that, and here's the key that is pressed. So what do we do with this? So here, anything we put here happens when a key is pressed. So for instance, to take it just to make sure it works, what if I was to say, okay, well, let's find out what key is pressed. We'll say just print the key. Now we're not even using graphics yet. We just want the output over here to print the key that we're running. So you can see it loaded this frame, which is just a part of CodeSculptor, but we don't even really need it. And now it's not redrawing, but as I type, I'm getting numbers showing up on the screen. So as I type in A, it's a 65, B, C, D. And if you remember this, you'll recognize this as the Unicode or the ASCII values of the letters on the keyboard. If I was to press the enter key, the ASCII value is 13, or the left shift key is 16. Spacebar is 32. So as you go through this, you'll see, oh, well, now I know what the ASCII values are, or again, Unicode. ASCII is the first section of Unicode. So I close this. Oh, by the way, when I run that, if this doesn't automatically highlight, my frame has to be highlighted for things to happen inside the frame. Sometimes Google Chrome doesn't automatically highlight the frame and you have to click on it first. So when I first run it, I'm typing but nothing's happening. I click here and I type and things happen. So we print the key, and the key is a number. So how are we going to use that? Well, what if we were to print, instead of printing the key, what if we were to print the character of that value? So now when I press A, I get A, right? So I'm using that character function to say, oh, look, I can type on the keyboard. And yeah, and it works. And again, as I press other things, left shift doesn't have a value. It can't print a value for left shift. So that doesn't work. Oh, that is the tilde. It makes as a A with an accent on it, so that's kind of strange. So anyway, that's the basics of how a key down handler is being used. So let's do one other thing here in this tutorial just to give you another idea of what you can do with this. Let's create our actual draw program. Set the draw handler to a function called draw. And so now I define draw, and draw comes with it, of course, the canvas that we're drawing on. And so we want to, what would we draw? Now notice these are two different functions. Like, they don't share information unless we make a global variable. So that's something that we're going to have to overcome in a minute. But let's just first say, okay, let's do canvas draw text. And the question is, can we print like the character of key in here, and then we have to give it like the XY coordinates of what we want to print. So this is like the text message we want to print. This is where we want to print them on the screen. Our screen is only 300 by 200, so I'm going to print it at 150, 100. This is the font size I should print in, so like 48 point, and I'm going to make it green. And it says key is not defined. So again, because key is local to this function, I don't really know what it is. So I have to create some sort of global variable to handle this. So I'm just going to come up here and I'm going to make a variable called text. I'm going to start it out as equaling nothing. And down here, I'm going to say, okay, well, we have a global variable called text, and I want text to equal the CHR of key. So I'm not going to print it anymore. I don't need that anymore. And then up here, I'm going to print text. And so now I'm in here and I print A, and so you can see it's just printing the letter that I said it would be, because I'm able to send the information basically here as text over to my draw command so I can use it. You could also start doing if statements in your key down, right? So if text equals W, maybe then we'll make another variable called circle. So in order to make this work, I have to go ahead and put in something here called circle, and I have to up here make something called circle equals false. And then on my canvas I can say something like this: if circle canvas draw circle, and then I just need a quick circle here, so the radius of the circle will be 10, the line thickness 1, and it will be a red circle. And then I can say, if it's anything except for a W, just go ahead and print the text, right? So basically I've created the ability to do different things based on the keys that I press. So I'm sitting here pressing keys, but if I press W, it didn't do it. Oh, I know why. Haha. It's because I should have made W capital. There it is, circle. So I'm pressing, oh, now that I've set it equal to true, it's always going to be true, so I should say else circle equals false, so I can make it disappear again, and then of course I can go blah 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 W, blah 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 W. Right, so those are just some hints to help you get started on how this works and the implications of it, like things you can do with it that might be interesting. So now you'll probably want to move on to your assignments, and I'll give some more help based on those exact assignments.